Hey, Eric.
Hey, Al.
So you're ready for the podcast?
You damn right I am. I'm excited.
What do you know about goat versus fish?
It's goat versus fish, and the goats win. Oh, shit. The goats win. Lost a little fella.
And what do you got to tell the folks that have never heard this podcast before? That know you but don't know this podcast?
Well, if you know me, you definitely know my mama's got a big-ass goat farm. And you're going to hear a lot of goat stories on this podcast. So sit back, grab a rocking chair and some whiskey. I'm telling y'all some stories.
Goat versus fish. Comic Con. Comic Con. Goat versus Fish is recording these verses after the mighty verses of Comic Con. Goat versus Fish did spread the verses so loudly and singing so celebratorily as well, often competing with many false verses, the many false verses outside of the Comic Con. These fence-sitters did spread false verses with a megaphone, they did call it, yes? Speaking of how all the goat and fish of the verses of Comic-Con were degenerate goat and fish, and that they would all go to a place of forever unpleasantness if they did not accept their fence-sitterly verses and sit on the fence with them. But it was their verses that in order to accept their fence-sitterly verses, of course, they would have to not be goat or fish. They would have to say they are not goat or fish and denounce goat versus fish. They would ask a goat or fish to renounce its very goat or fish. What makes it a very goat or fish? What verses are these? What unpleasant verses are these? False verses. False verses. Be the goat or fish that you know that you are. They spoke of love, yes, they spoke of love for all. Is love a goat or a fish? Goat versus fish does not know. But they spoke of love for all, and yet they said they did not love goat versus fish. This is the way of the fence-sitter, never following even their own verses. So stuck on the fence they are, so pitiably stuck on the fence. But that did not stop goat versus fish from spreading the verses of goat versus fish, bringing pleasantness to goat and fish. And yet now, in this verses of speaking, goat versus fish is finding it difficult to spread the verses, but that does not stop goat versus fish. And so here in the Goat vs. Fish podcast from the world-famous Comedy Store Los Angeles is another Goat vs. Fish podcast. Goat vs. Fish depends on you now, more than ever in the verses, goat and fish, to help amplify the verses of Goat vs. Fish. Follow Goat vs. Fish on the social media to witness the evidence of the verses of San Diego Comic-Con, and spread the verses of the Goat vs. Fish podcast. Goat vs. Fish will speak more of these Comic-Con verses and even deep, fat, fried verses. Oh, have you heard of those verses? On future verses of the Goat vs. Fish podcast. Now, the verses you are about to hear was listened at the Comedy Store Los Angeles some verses ago, and now you shall hear the evidence of that verses. And Goat vs. Fish will be sounding pleasantly as verses. And it was written, and it was written. In the beginning, there was Goat versus Fish. The goat fish. And Goat versus Fish said that there should be goat and that there should be fish. There is no alpha or omega. There is no black or white. There is no good or evil. There is only goat and fish. And Goat versus Fish. Welcome to the Goat vs. Fish podcast, recorded at the world-famous Comedy Store Los Angeles, a place of goat versus fish. Goat vs. Fish speaks to you now, speaks directly to you. You have many questions, yes? Who is Goat versus Fish? What is Goat versus Fish? Why is Goat versus Fish? But there is only one question. Are you goat or are you fish? Ponder it now. Who shall triumph, the goat or the fish? Let us find out on this Verses of Goat versus Fish. Verses of celebration of goat, verses of celebration of goat. This Verses is a Verses for celebration. Celebration. And on this Verses we celebrate goat. We shall celebrate fish as well. Celebrate fish as well? We may even celebrate a fence sitter that at long Verses chooses goat or fish, but joining Goat versus Fish, this Verses is one who knows how to celebrate goat, who knows all about the goat. And so it is a Verses of goatly celebration. Some have asked, what is a goat? Well, a goat is a goat, and a goat is versus the fish. But let us learn more of goat. Let us learn more of goat. Let us be regaled of mighty verses of goat from one who is close with the goat, who is close to the goat. Goat versus Fish remembers a Madison Sinclair goat from the 18th Verses of the Goat versus Fish podcast, one that claimed to be close to many goat, claimed to be the goat comic, it even did say, and yet was not so keen to share pleasant verses of goat with Goat versus Fish. But this one that now speaks to Goat versus Fish, that soon speaks to Goat versus Fish, shall surely have pleasant verses of goat, surely has pleasant verses of goat. This Verses, Goat versus Fish, speaks to a one. And what do the ones call this one? What do the ones call this one?
They call me Eric Carter.
They call it Eric Carter, they call it Eric Carter, yes? And are you goat or are you fish?
Goat.
Oh, you are goat. You're sure you're a goat?
Positive.
You are positive you are a goat.
Yes,
you
sir.
almost sounded like you were going to say fish.
That's because I'm hungry.
Oh, you are hungry for fish.
But goats win.
Oh, the goats triumph. Yes, you are a goat and you say the goats triumph?
Oh, the goats triumph, no doubt.
Ah, the goats do triumph. The goats do triumph. You have heard it from this goat. You have heard it from this goat, of course. A goat would say that the goat triumph. What say you, fish? What say you, fish? Goat versus Fish has heard that you have many pleasant verses of goat. You are close to goat, yes?
Yes, I am.
Tell us of goat. Tell all the ones who listen and Goat versus Fish of the goat that you have seen their verses. You have seen their verses. Tell Goat versus Fish all about goat.
My pleasure. In 2011, the summer of 2011, my mother bought her first goat. I was probably about 26 years old. She calls me, and this is a year before I started stand-up. She called me, she's like, Eric, I'm buying a goat. And we got to drive 2 hours to Prentice, Mississippi to pick it up. And we went up there, bought it from a goat farm. And the first goat was a special needs goat named Ross. He was dehorned for some reason. Don't know the story behind that. He was blind and also deaf. He's the Helen Keller of goats. So he was the first to the bunch, the first of many to come. And then after that, Mom got us some twins, Pumpkin and Lydia. And then she got a bull named Conway, who's still around. He's still the bull of the herd. But for the past 7 years, my mother has turned into the goat queen down at Hattiesburg, Mississippi, my hometown. Throughout the years, I've had to help maintain the goat farm, so I've seen many versus goats. So first it was Conway. First it was Ross, the special needs, Pumpkin and Lydia, Conway, and then Mom bought these triplets that she never named, but they're still there. Conway and Ross didn't get along too well. You can't put two bulls together.
It was goat versus goat.
It was goat versus goat, civil strife. Well, he wouldn't let Ross eat out of the bowl. They always headbutt each other. And with Ross being blind and deaf, he would get lost. This is on 45 acres of Mississippi land, woods. And they free range. They do have a pen and stuff where they can go in for shelter, but they can help themselves in and out. And they got 45 acres to graze. Ross would get lost about 3 times a day. From one of my mother's bathrooms, whether I'm showering or taking care of business, I hear Ross cry like, nah, nah. I look out there and Ross is just in the yard just screaming. The twins, Lydia and Pumpkin, mean to him. Just left him hanging. Conway pretty much says, kiss my ass. But those sweet, nameless triplets came up and will always escort him around. They'll help him eat his food. Because we have plenty of bowls of feed for him, and we also throw in hay. And there's a lot of trees around because they like green leaves. It's good for them.
So this is a versus of goat supporting goat to become stronger so that
Yes.
they can versus the fish. Goat versus fish was concerned that this blind goat that you speak of, the hornless goat that you speak of, maybe could not versus fish as well as the other goat?
Yes, but he can hold his own. He definitely held his own against Conway. And so, yeah, they'll also eat, we cut branches from pine trees, magnolias, oak trees. So they get the goat feed, hay, leaves from a tree, which they love very much, and the food that they eat clear in the 45 acres. But Conway and Ross will fight all the time. It was pretty intense. It's like the WrestleMania of goats. They get on their hind legs, and Ross with no horns never back down from him. And then usually they'll butt heads for about a few minutes and then go, their separate ways. And with the triplets taking care of Ross. He's quite an inspiration.
An inspiration? It is an inspiration to you, goat.
Well, yeah, it is an inspiration to me and just to anybody. That's a good person, He's like I said, the Helen Keller of goats. Ross, blind, can't see, but it didn't stop him from standing his ground. He didn't let nobody bully him around.
Not even a fish? Not even the mightiest fish?
Oh, the fish are in the water. The only time they come out is when we're making bass.
So there are fish. You know a fish as well.
Yes, I do.
Goat versus fish. When Goat versus Fish was speaking to the Madison Sinclair goat, that did say it had many goat as well, yes? Goat versus Fish asked it, yes? So, Madison Sinclair won, yes? Have these goat ever seen a fish to versus? And that one said, that goat said, that those goat had not even seen a fish. But you say, the goat of which you speak, have seen a fish. They have seen fish.
Every day.
They see fish every versus.
Every day. Every versus. As a matter of fact, this is how dominant the goats are. Yes, they do have water for them to drink, but they also like pond water. So they walk up to the fish's home, the pond.
Yes.
You got bass and brim because it's see-through. You can see through the water. So these bass and brim are in their home, their habitat, the only place they can breathe. And they look up, and they have now probably about 15 goats just drinking their home.
15 goat consuming the sea of the fish. Oh, it is goat versus fish. Continue with these verses of goat versus fish.
Oh, they go help themselves. They go in there to just drink up. I mean, of course, it's a big pond, so it's never going to run out. But just the fact that the goats can go to their home and drink it and then walk back and help themselves to the rest of the 45 acres. As a fish, if they're coming out of the water, they're going on a plate. So, yeah, the goats definitely win, and they got it made, too.
Do you hear it, fish? Oh, fish who listen, fish who listen. Have you ever heard such a dominance of goat over fish? Oh, fish. Oh, fish.
Oh, yeah, very dominant. They get fed very well. We don't even feed the fish. They just eat whatever's in the pond.
Ah, you care more for the goat than the fish?
In a pet-wise, yes, because we don't have any pet fish. I'm glad they're there because bass taste really good. I mean, they have a role in society, but they're not beating the goats.
They are there to versus the goat. If there were no fish, it would not be goat versus fish.
The only thing the fish have on the goats is they were there longer, and that's it.
Ah, this is an advantage of the fish, yes?
It should be, but it isn't. The goats still win. I mean, just the fact that they drink out of their home.
What did the fish say? What did the fish do when you first brought goat to the fish? The first verses of goat and fish.
The only thing they could do, swim to another bank. They got out of the way.
Ah, they swam away from the goat. Oh, they swam away from the goat.
It goes to seeing about probably 30 brim and bass near shore. Then they all scatter out to the other end of the pond. Big pond, and when after a flood or after it rains, it turns pretty much a lake. It's about an acre big.
Now, Goat versus Fish has heard that you call yourself a comedian goat. Is this so?
I wouldn't say comedian goat. I respect my goats. I don't try to ride their coattails, but I do give them good spotlight, highlight their good qualities, what they do for the family, and all that stuff.
Yes, but what of you, goat? You are a goat, and are you a comedian goat?
Well, I guess you put it that way. I am a goat comic.
Well then, I have heard that the comic-y ones usually have humorous verses. Do you have any humorous verses of the goat that are with you?
Oh, yeah. Look, here's something that the goats do that the fish can never do. The first few years of having the goats, Mom also had chickens. They free range, and they can go wherever they want to. No fences to hold them in.
No fences for the chicken. Is it chicken, a goat, or a fish?
Well, chicken will be on the goats team because
it is goat. It is goat.
It is goat.
Long verses. Chicken is goat.
and the goats are still there. Chickens are not, so goats definitely win. But Mom has a brick shed behind her house where she keeps the feed, tools, and all that. And the feed's in a aluminum can, big old aluminum trash can with a lid to keep the snakes out, keep from mice coming in. Mice come in, rattlesnakes and moccasins follow.
Sounds as fence sitters.
So-
Sounds as fence sitters, yes.
So here's how smart the goats are. Like, I'll walk outside, they're probably like a few football fields away. Soon as I make that first scoop of food, I feel a goat's horn poking me in my butt cheek. And I turn around and it's Pumpkin. I was like, get out of here, Pumpkin. I'm trying to get your food. Then when I'm shooing her away, 3 goats walk up behind me and I turn around. I got goats on their back legs with their head in the trash can, just tearing it down. And then I run them off, and then 3 other ones sneak up in. They're very crafty, very tricky. But like, you got feed, they'll follow you around anywhere. And they're very loyal to my mother, too. My mom pulls up, they come and greet her. Like, they come walk to the car to say hello. And one other goat, one of the most recent ones,
A recent goat. Another goat.
she is probably about a year old now. Her name is Mary.
Let us hear all of the verses that these ones call themselves. There is Mary the goat. There is Pumpkin the goat. Yes, name all the goat. Name all the goat.
All right, well, only a few of them actually have names. So I'll go back to ones I mentioned before. Like Rawls, he's no longer with us. He passed a year and a half ago. Conway is still there. He's still the stubborn bull, and he don't make loud noises. He just goes, sounds like Popeye, and he looks like a ram. He's stacked. You got Pumpkin and Lydia, his twin girlfriends, and then you got the nameless triplets. That's his other girlfriends. And now you have Mary, her who used to be a house goat. Have you ever came across a guest with a house goat?
GoatVsFish has never heard of a house goat. Never a house goat. But before we speak of this house goat, GoatVsFish wants to hear of this house goat. You said there was one goat that is no longer with GoatVsFish?
Yes, and that was Helen Keller, Ross.
That was the Helen Keller Ross goat. Let us take a moment of verses. Let us take a moment of verses for the Helen Keller Ross goat. Oh, GoatVsFish, oh, GoatVsFish. Let us recall now the Helen Keller Ross goat. Oh, how it did versus fish. Oh, how it did versus fish. And oh, how it was with its fellow goat, with its fellow goat. Never sitting on the fence, never sitting on the fence. A true goat, a true goat. Goat versus fish. Now let us hear of this house goat. Let us hear of this house goat.
All right, we're going to tell y'all about Mary. Now, before we get into Mary, you got to understand something about goats. The nannies, the female goats, they're only in season a few months a year. The male goats are horny 24/7.
Horny goats, horny goats.
So you got to keep the gender separated, once it's when it's not mating season. One female goat slipped away, don't know which one. Conway had his way with her. Mom went out to feed the goats the next morning, and she heard her cry, like, "Ma, ma." Mom reached down, and there's little Mary, weighs about 2 pounds. And the goat that had the baby was barely an adult herself, so she didn't know what to do. So Pumpkin and Lydia stepped in as the role of the mother and fed Mary. But soon as Mama picked Mary up, she rested her little head up on my mom's shoulder. My mom got attached. She was like, you want to come inside with me? So Mary's first 6 months of living, she stayed inside the house. She drank buttermilk. She ate dog food. And she'll go outside and play with the other goats, but soon as the back door opens, she looks and she beelines it for my mother. Runs straight in the house.
And is your mother a goat or a fish?
Oh, she's a goat.
So wonderful goat.
Oh, she's a goat queen. So she comes in there, she bottle fed her, and then spoiled her with buttermilk, eating dog food. And then those 6 months staying with the inside dog, that's a B. She's a yellow lab. She's like Garfield. She hates going outside. She'd rather eat. She developed a bond with her. And then you got B's brother, Rascal, the outside dog, a black lab. She became very close to him because it got to a point where Mary was too big. She got really fat. Oh, she's like a fat, spoiled princess now. She's huge.
Fat, spoiled goat, fat, spoiled goat. Oh, fish, perhaps you could go after this goat if it is so fat that it cannot even nimbly versus fish.
Oh, no, this one don't even drink out of the pond water. She gets like fancy water. She gets her own little water bowl. Yeah, Mom spoiled her to death, and guests will come over not knowing there's a house goat. When they open the door, they got Mary greeting the guest. And, and then, she got to ride in the car with Mom a few times. And she loves car rides. So anytime my mom pulls up and opens the door, Mary just jumps on in, parks herself in the front. She'll climb over my mother, big as she is. I don't know how she does it, and finds her way to the front seat.
And this is the same house goat, yes?
Mary, yes.
It is Mary the house goat. It is Mary the car goat. It is a spoiled goat. It is a fat goat. It has a sea of its very own from which it consumes fish. If you are listening now, perhaps this is a way that you could triumph over goat. Yes, infiltrate that special sea of the fish, yes, for that one goat, and perhaps you can triumph there. Yes? Tell GoatVsFish, tell GoatVsFish. In this place of which you speak, in this place of many goat and also the fish, you mentioned a fence, yes? You mentioned a fence?
There is a fence.
Tell us of this fence, GoatVsFish. Oh, it is not pleasant to hear of the fence, but we must hear of the fence so that we can be warned of the fence. Tell us of the fence. Tell us of the fence. Ones who listen. Now, if the ones that are with you are particularly small ones, yes, perhaps these are not the verses for the tiny ones who have not yet heard the verses of the fence, yes? But for those who know, they must hear the warnings of the fence. Let us hear of the fence.
The fence was on the property before Mom bought it, and it was originally to keep the deer out. It was for our garden. Now Mom made it a little community for the goats. So they got their own little house. They can help themselves in and out, and the fence remains open. They can help themselves out. They can help themselves in. They have shelter when it storms. That's where they eat as well. That's where we throw the hay. Put the limbs from the trees in, and they want to get out, they just go out and take a stroll, drink out the fish's home, the pond.
You hear it, fence sitters, Oh, you are so proud that you sit on the fence, and yet the fence does not even prevent the goat from versing the fish or the fish from versing the goat. Yes, abandon the fence now.
But yeah, it's a fence, not a prison, so telling you, these goats live a damn good life, and all of them are spoiled as hell. Mary definitely takes a cake. And something else I was wanting to say about Mary. Now she sleeps outside, and she became best friends with Rascal, the black lab that stays outside. So she'll bark at cars with him, and the beginning of each day is like a little, almost like sending your kid to school. Rascal and Mary sleep on the back porch. Every morning, Conway, the bull, he leads all of his goats up to the back porch and picks up Mary. Rascal walks Mary to the end of the porch, sees her off, and between 3 and 4 every day, they walk Mary back. And she gets back on the porch with Rascal, and she's got like a comfy bed. Like probably comfortable than the bed most comics sleep in here in L.A. So yeah, she also likes to sit in the swing. She eats dog food with Rascal. That's like her adopted father. Protects her. So this goat even has a bodyguard.
And it must also be a goat, yes? Must also be a goat, a friendly goat for the Mary goat?
Oh, Mary is friendly. She's just spoiled. And still to this day, when Mom opens the door, she just walks right in.
But you speak of the black lab-friendly goat. It must be goat, yes? It is goat or fish?
Oh, he's goat.
It is goat again. Of course it is goat again. There does not seem to be a unity of goat and fish in this place. Not a unity of goat and fish, only GoatVsFish.
Well, like I said, the only thing the fish have that the other animals don't is they serve as food.
The verses of consumption. The verses of consumption. It is a popular verses, yes? You are a goat. You have said you consume the fish. Do the goat consume the fish? Do the other goat consume the fish?
Nah, the goats don't eat meat. Well, they would eat meat if you feed it to them, but they just eat brushes. They're, I guess, what you call vegans. They only eat plant-based, and they eat hay.
Hay, yes, you have spoken of hay. But all things are goat and fish. Is hay goat or fish?
Goat.
It is goat again. They draw their strength of goat from other goat. It is not unheard of.
Yeah, they draw strength from each other. Their little community. They travel and they stay together. And they go out and graze a field. They'll greet you when you pull up. And in some cases, they'll sleep around the car. Last time I went home, I rented a truck from Enterprise, just rented a pickup truck, and every time I go back to the truck, I got like 7 goats just laying around.
7 goats, 7 goats, goat. Do you know how much it pleases GoatVsFish to hear these verses of Goat, to hear these verses of Goat? GoatVsFish wishes to thank you for these verses of Goat. Thank you, Goat.
Oh, yeah. Well, definitely big thanks to the goats. They help keep the place clean. They're funny as hell. Very nosy, too. Like, they're all up in your business. Like, I got my bedroom still at my mother's place when I go and stay with her, when I go and visit. I'll be inside changing with my curtains open, and I look up, and I got like 5 or more goats just staring in the window at me.
Oh, Goat, Goat.
They're perverts, they're horny, but they're hilarious.
Hilarious, Goat. Oh, hilarious, Goat. Now, you speak now to GoatVsFish, yes?
Yes.
Now that you have come to learn more of the mighty verses of GoatVsFish, and that all things are goat and fish, all things are goat and fish, though you did say that it was a good life for goat, yes, but there is no good or evil, there is only goat or fish. But besides those verses, what is your feeling now? That you are presiding, yes, with this Queen Mother Goat, over such a mighty verses of Goat versus Fish. Now that you understand it as Goat versus Fish, how do you feel about these verses now?
I definitely look at them in a different way, and definitely open my mind on how, comparing the goats and the fish. And we're glad the fish are there. We don't hate them.
Oh, yes.
But we don't prioritize them as much as we do the goats. And then, like, when the nannies have babies, mom will keep them with their mothers, keep the babies with their mothers for about 7 or 8 months because you don't want to create separation anxiety. You want them to be able to feed off the mother. Then when they reach a certain size, as soon as mom puts them on the market, you have people drive from Florida, Kentucky, Midwest, Louisiana. They drive hours. Some of them, one person drove from Jacksonville. That's like almost like a 15-hour trip just to come buy a goat. And mom has a background check she runs when she does sell goats. You got to email her where they're going to be staying.
Yes.
Make sure they have, good land. They're going to be well taken care of. Like, she's got to get your 411. And not that she's never had to, but if she ever did hear that they went to a bad home, she'll go and pick them up. No questions asked, and you won't get a refund.
Forever caring for goat, forever caring for goat. Yes, they come from so far to witness these mighty goat.
And also, too, Mama never named them, so I don't know what their names are, but Mom sold these 2 goats to someone who owns a petting zoo in Louisiana. And they sent pictures of the goats back to Mother. And now you got 2 goats just born in small town Mississippi, now living with zebras, camels, these animals all around the world. It would be like, a human traveling abroad to get to see all these people from other lands, other cultures. So they're living a sweet life on a 100-acre zoo.
Spreading the verses of Goat, spreading the goat themselves to all over the verses, to the fence-sitters, to the ones who have not yet chosen goat or fish. Speaking of the communication, if any goat or fish or fence-sitter or one who listens to the GoatVsFish podcast wishes to communicate with you, Goat, to ask you about the verses of Goat, how do they communicate with this one?
Hit me up on Instagram at call.me.ec. Or you can hit me up on Twitter at callbec. Bring in your questions. I can answer just about most goat questions, if not all.
What do you say to the goat?
Thank you. That's what I say to the goat. Thank you. Thank you for being a majestic creature. Thank you for bringing happiness to my family and to all the listeners of GoatVsFish. And just thank you for being awesome animals. And I also like to thank the fish, too, because they taste really well. They're good for you, as long as you don't catch it out of somewhere with pollution, or that's not raised on one of those farms where they feed a bunch of bullshit. So I do thank the fish as well. And I wish nothing but happiness for the fish, but definitely thank you to the goats.
What do you say to the fence sitter?
Well, if you're riding on the fence, you don't know which way to go. I understand, but just keep in mind, everyone has their different preference, but goat brings happiness and joy. If you're going to fall off the fence, fall off the side of happiness.
There are goat there.
Oh, they'll be waiting on you. They'll greet you. They'll clean your land. And also, too, here's a little fun fact about goats. They have the highest value in livestock. They're higher than cattle and horses. That's one of the many reasons why they win.
The value of goat, the value of goat. Oh, the value of goat, yes.
Oh, yes. Well, I have an uncle named Uncle Kent, And throughout most of his life, he was on the rodeo circuit when he wasn't working in the oil field. He rode bulls, rode broncos. And when my mom first started getting goats, I was helping him in his horse field. And he said, your mother's a genius. I go, what you mean? He's like, those goats she's tapping into, they got the highest value on the market. And he explained it to me, when you factor in the cost of maintaining them, the value you get back, for selling them or whatever, ranks higher than horses and cattle. And since Mom was the first in her community to kind of start off the goats, she's a goat queen. Anybody that needs a goat, has a question about a goat back in my hometown of Hattiesburg, they call my mother.
Now goat, now goat. We do not have many verses left, but now is the celebration. The verses for celebration of Goat vs. Fish and to celebrate Goat vs. Fish. I can think of no better celebration than to hear the sound of the goat. Let us together make the sound of the goat. Let us together make the sound of the goat.
Okay.
Here comes a fish, here comes a fish. What is the sound of the goat when it sees the fish coming to verses? That is Goat vs. Fish. That is Goat vs. Fish.
Thank you for having me.
Always think Goat vs. Fish. Always think Goat vs. Fish. Thank you for joining Goat vs. Fish. These are the verses of Goat vs. Fish. Subscribe, rate, and review the Goat vs. Fish podcast on the YouTube and the iTunes. Follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media. On the Instagram, on the Book of Faces, on the Twitterver, all at Goat vs. Fish, all at GoatVsFish, and even on the Twitch. And to witness a live verses of Goat vs. Fish at one of the comedy places or conventions, go to GoatVsFish.com. That's GoatVsFish.com to find the places and times of all future verses. The theme celebration for this verses was an offering by McHenry on SoundCloud, a fish. And if you, one who listens, has a celebration of Goat vs. Fish, in song or poem or any other celebration, do send it to goatvsfish@gmail.com or the social media and send your questions as well. Join the Goat vs. Fish discussion group on the Book of Faces to discuss Goat vs. Fish with other goat and fish. And when you are out in the land and the sea, look about you. Look about you. Find one who is lost. Find one who does not know the way. And ask. Simply ask, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or fish? Thank you for joining Goat vs. Fish. I am Goat vs. Fish, the goat fish.
And it was written, and it was written.
And how do you feel, sir, at the Goat vs. Fish podcast?
I feel educated. I feel like I'm coming out brighter than I was coming in. It was fun.
Goat.
Fish.
Do you promise to be a true goat?
Yes, I do.
A goat in all things goat?
All things go.
And forever versus the fish?
Forever versus the fish.
We celebrate this goat. We celebrate this goat. And it is goat for this goat. It is goat for this goat. It is goat for this goat. Oh, yes. You are a goat now. And you are part of the mighty verses of Goat versus Fish. Oh, you support the goat. You catch the goat.
Oh, I got the goats back. Goats forever. Number one.
Forever goat! Forever goat. And this one. The Eric Carter goat. We celebrate this goat. We celebrate this goat! Albamani one, will you make the sound of a goat? Celebration! Celebration!